you can publicly shame, you can kind of handpick anyone, any discipline, any academic, any background, any department that you want, and print it all over the national newspapers without any sort of substantial proof. That creates an atmosphere of fear and anxiety, and it signals to everyone else to be quiet. So it reproduces silence. The fact that Europe is not polluted is because they outsource their polluting work to other countries. Pity and sorry is not what Dalit scholars are asking for. They want you to change the structural conditions in which they are being marginalized. Well, I don't think I've been listened to. I think this is the first time.
Welcome to Missing Chapters. In this podcast, we talk about racism in higher education, about power, knowledge, and the perspectives that are often missing or overlooked in academic spaces. Missing Chapters brings together research, practice, and activism and highlights perspectives that are frequently marginalized within universities. Each episode focuses on a specific theme related to anti-racist knowledge production, institutional responsibility, and possibilities for change. I'm Anja Nunula Glover. Thank you for listening. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast Missing Chapters. Today, we are going to talk about the question, what does it mean to produce feminist, decolonial, and anti-racist knowledge in Switzerland as a scholar who comes from India and whose work is rooted in Global South perspectives. I'm going to do this podcast with my guest of today. Hello and welcome, Anukriti Dixit.
Hi, nice to be here with you today.
Very nice to have you here. You're an advanced postdoc and lecturer at the IZFG right here where we are today, and you work with feminist and decolonial knowledge. Now, you came to Switzerland a few years ago. How was it for you to arrive in Switzerland, and how did that maybe change?
To arrive, it was quite a big shift in perspective, in culture, in the way things are academically, in the way things are personally, structurally. So it was a pretty big shift, right from small things to, for example, smiling too much in buses and then not getting the smiles back.
Okay.
To having certain interactions with immigration offices where, because you're new, you don't know any of the informations, and many times people are reluctant to give you a lot of information. They just give you what you need for that few minutes, for that interaction, and otherwise you're kind of just clueless in this big bureaucracy. So which is pretty much migration 101. I mean, it's when you're a migrant, this does happen. But what didn't change over time for me was this kind of discomfort that I kept feeling about my interactions with people here, with officials here, where I kind of felt like there's a structural element of kind of the inability to talk about anything from a helpful perspective. And just a kind of a very expression of neutrality, expression of like a lack of emotions in the way that everyday dealings happen. And at first, I didn't recognize this as a symbol of racism. I would often think that this is probably just the way people are over here. But over time, I began to realize that when they interact with others, or specifically with Swiss people, the same bureaucrats are nicer, but are not that nice to me. So that was one. The other was kind of the structural politics of gratitude that I didn't realize, which was that I was supposed to feel grateful to have Swiss money. And I got told by very early on by a migration official, he was speaking of his previous visitor, and they were having an argument, and then this guy left, and then I came to his desk, and then he just told me, oi, 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 everyone wants Swiss money, but nobody wants to follow our rules.
Wow.
And for me, it was a little surprising, because I felt like there's an assumption there that you're giving money to migrants for free. which is not the case. We are working for that money, right? It's labor in exchange for money, which is pretty much how it works all across the world. There is nothing new about it. So these few transitions for me were very difficult to accommodate, where I couldn't place myself in a system which was quite extractive and which took my labor for granted and didn't acknowledge it. So I guess the good part about arrival in Switzerland was also that there were many other migrants who felt like this.
Yes.
And you could easily find them, and you could easily network with them and make friends with them. And there was a lot of help offered from those circles. And I learned how to forge solidarities, which was something I wouldn't have learned only in my own specific context. So that was a very big plus side of migrating. Yes.
So you moved quite a lot. You have a background in software engineering and sustainable development and public policy, and you went to Paris as well to study and to work. And then you came to Switzerland. What were the specifics about the academic culture here in Switzerland? Is there any difference to the places you were before, or is there something very specific, maybe also when it comes to post-colonial, decolonial studies or racism?
Yes, there are marked differences between the Indian context and here. I mean, for one, decolonialism, post-colonialism is a fairly everyday affair in Indian academia. A lot of people do this research. It's a very well-recognized form, methodology of doing research, or also of doing activism. And there is a fair bit of academic activism in India. And this was something that I missed when I came to Switzerland. Not only is there not enough of a discussion on decoloniality, on post-coloniality, on anti-racist studies or critical race theory, but there is also a kind of hesitation for academics to take position, to take up positions, because this would mean that they are kind of branded as activists. Whereas in India, it's kind of part and parcel of your life. You do how much ever social engagement that you want. And no one would ever brand you something for it. You wouldn't be labeled for this.
Okay. So do you think there is more of a separation between activist work and academic work in Switzerland than there is in India?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I come from a very elite kind of institution where I did my PhD. Is one of the most elite places in the country. In fact, it is often criticized for being very exclusionary of people from lower classes, of people from oppressed caste backgrounds. It's a very, very quote unquote upper caste institution. And even there, the protest culture was very strong. It was expected of professors that they will join in protests, and they would call students when they were, and students would organize protests and call upon professors to join. So it was a very kind of, I remember this incident very fondly, that I attended a class by Professor Ritika Khera. She's very famous. She's an economist. And then after class, she just told me, hey, I'm going to the old city of Ahmedabad where we used to live. And I will be talking to a lot of non-academic people, just like regular everyday people, and explaining to them why this kind of unique identification number that's being given to Indians, it's kind of a digital surveillance, and that they're not obliged to enroll in this system, because it could also be a geolocation system many times and a surveillance system. And then she told me, let's take a rickshaw. And we took a small auto rickshaw and went. We had tea at I think at a very famous tea stall that was in that part of the city. And then she spoke and we attended, and it was like 400 or 500 people who had come to listen to her. And none of them was academic. They were all sort of middle to lower class backgrounds, oppressed caste, Muslims, people from all religions and all castes were there. And then after she spoke, she asked me, how was it for you? And I was really inspired, and I was like, this is great. I want to do this as well. And she was like, yeah, I mean, this is why we are academics. Like this is the kind of labor that's essential for all the other stuff is just part and parcel of life. But this is the part of it that's like so fulfilling.
Yeah.
And like that's the culture I grew up in, even in a very elite institution, which I have also criticized at many points in life. But even there, I found ample proof, and I myself organized protests as a part of that elite institution. So that was the difference, key difference for me, that here people were really reluctant within the university, within the academic spaces, to join these social movements, to critique the government, to critique systems around them. Yeah.
Did you also get advice around that, or did you feel that if you want to pursue your career, your academic career here in Switzerland or maybe Europe, you have to do it the same way like the Swiss do, and rather not be the activist person you are? Or do you care about this, or how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, more than advice, I feel like, yes, I did get advice from some people that it's probably not in your best interest if you want any sort of career in Switzerland to follow. Too much activism, a little bit is okay, but you shouldn't overdo it, which I could never understand. What is the meaning of, like, where is this line being drawn?
When is it overdone?
Yeah, this was also confusing for me, but it was also that the way that kind of events would unfold when I was here. For example, it was really surprising to me that a lot of times I would see articles in the newspapers about academics, which were really, in a way, sort of attacking them, or taking a dig at their careers, their credentials. And this was a big signal for me, because if you can publicly shame, you can kind of handpick anyone, any discipline, any academic, any background, any department that you want, and print it all over the national newspapers without any sort of substantial proof that these are like non-credible producers of knowledge, that creates an atmosphere of fear and anxiety, and it signals to everyone else to be quiet. So it, in a way, reproduces silence. Yeah.
Yeah. So your work is rooted in Global South perspectives. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Like in what way is that very important to you, and how can we understand the Global South perspectives?
Well, I think we have to understand the Global South perspectives by first understanding that the Global South is not a monolith, and that it's not a single category. And I feel like in Swiss academia in particular, also in European academia at large, there is a tendency to conflate all of the Global Souths and bring them all kind of in this banner, in this single term. And the surprising part of this is that it's not like we don't know that it's very diverse. Every person that I meet in Swiss academia says, oh, India is so diverse. There are so many languages, there are so many cultures, and it's huge. So there is an awareness of it, but in a sense that there is not enough of an academic awareness of this. The scale and the diversity of the world out there beyond Europe. So I think one thing that we need to do is to kind of, this Global South word is a sort of misnomer, because there is no single Global South. There are many Souths. The other thing that I feel is that there is a sense of inherent supremacy when it comes to talking about Europe as world leaders, as kind of custodians of the United Nations, as the founders of the United Nations, as people who excel in everything, as people who've had all the best ideas. And when you sort of are a decolonial academic, little by little, you begin to deconstruct all of these notions and these assumptions. And you sort of begin to see how this is a kind of very carefully curated image. It's an image curated through rejection of any criticism, for example. It's an image curated through crushing of dissent within Europe, where, for example, one of the ways in which that's done is, as I told you, the protest culture is just not very strong in Switzerland, which I think for me is one of the easiest ways to kind of, in the name of order or staying organized, it's a way of crushing dissent. And Jose Medina talks a lot about this in his book, Epistemology of Protest, as to how certain spaces are depoliticized through this move, kind of rhetorical move of telling academics that this is not your place or that don't do activism or something like this. So that's the other thing that I feel like we can structurally change, is to start thinking of other perspectives as not only important, but also formative for those people. For example, anti-caste knowledges that are produced in India. The caste-oppressed people of India have produced Dalit knowledges, Adivasi knowledges. Dalit are the caste-oppressed people. Adivasi are the tribal people. They are the custodians of nature and forests and land in India. And while they are also the bearers of a lot of violence at the hands of upper caste people, such as myself, they have produced a lot of knowledge, not only critiquing us, but also taking it to the realm of generative, constructive knowledge as to what to now do, what to do with the issues facing our society, what to do with the caste system, how to kind of avoid into this pitfall of your own bubble where you don't see anything around the 10 people around you. And we have to start taking those knowledges seriously. Europe has to start taking those because they exist. And we take each other very seriously, right? I take South American scholars very seriously. I take Rita Segato, Maria Lugones. They have said the most that there is to say about feminicide. And they've been activists and scholars and people in Latin America have really fought for their rights to have feminicide classified as a category. I take African knowledges very seriously. I take motherism seriously, Siwanism seriously. So we are all talking to each other, but this is just not known to Europe. You know, there is a kind of, I don't want to use ableist language. It's a kind of blind spot, but an area of neglect. Let's call it an area of neglect for the academia, for the larger context, academic context in Europe, where there's an assumption that everything that's done here is better and more efficient and important for the world. And the kind of immediate response that a decolonial scholar would have to this is that, but it is predicated upon extraction from the rest of the world. And the fact that Europe is not polluted is because they outsource their polluting work to other countries, which become polluted because they are producing medicines or chemicals for consumption in Europe. And it's not that Europeans don't know it. There have been really strong activists who have fought for climate change activism in Switzerland, for example. But they are, again, not regarded seriously. They are not taken seriously. In fact, there are court cases placed against them. So that's the other thing that I feel that the other side of this crushing of dissent is when the crushing of dissent doesn't work in this way, where you create a culture of silence, some people break out from the silence, then you use legal or police violence against them, which is what happened to climate activists.
Which is not framed like that publicly.
It is not.
Now, you are in the Swiss academia world right now. You bring all of these perspectives to this European and white academia. How is it received? Or how do you feel bringing these perspectives? Is it something that is just accepted, or something, are you listened to, or how do you feel?
Well, I don't think I've been listened to. I think this is the first time that probably I've been listened to. But normally, I have spoken out in a couple of events at University of Bern, at the Anti-Racism Week organized by the Students' Union, a couple of other places. But there's a very personal kind of psychological angle to this as well that I kind of want to discuss, that it takes a huge toll on you to talk about these things, to have to explain these things, because sometimes it also brings up your own embodied experiences of having been discriminated, and it's not always pleasant to rehash those memories and to talk about it again and again. So it's a lot of labor that we're expecting, not only scholars, but people from all walks of life to confront in their life, stuff that they may not feel safe or happy to confront in front of a lot of other people. For example, I had this tendency when I arrived in Europe to really talk about my personal life freely, because I thought that I have led a very varied life. I've gone through a lot of things, and that they inform who I am. And therefore, my personal circumstances should be part of this discussion so that the other person can humanize me, that they can see me, that I'm a person just like them. However, what ended up happening over time was that I often realized that by bringing out personal details of my life, I'm playing right into the stereotypes that have been built around me.
That's what I wanted to ask. You said so that people can relate and humanize you. Is that an answer to the dehumanization that is done to people of color?
I wouldn't say so, because people of color deserve their privacy. They deserve to keep themselves safe.
Yes.
They deserve to be happy and lead productive and happy and generative lives, and not have to continuously face the moments when we do face racism, the moments where we face violence and exclusion, are the moments that we take our time to unpack for ourselves. We shouldn't have to be put under pressure by a European audience and to make things palatable to them and speak to them in a way that they can understand so that they can humanize us. I think we deserve that respect because we are born into a human body and therefore we should be humanized.
But do you think it's just happening? We're just doing it because we think that's how people could relate to our stories?
Yes. Yes, there is a lot of this. It's a strange affective dimension that you enter in trying to convince, for example, a white person, a white European, that your perspective is valuable.
Yes.
You try to bring your personal stories in that in order to make it more relatable. But what might end up happening is that they feel, well, she said that she's been through X, Y, and Z in India. That's what is expected of such a patriarchal country. So they play right into the stereotype that you in the first place didn't want them to.
Yeah.
For example, if I talk now about how caste patriarchy works, because caste patriarchy is not exactly the form of Western patriarchy that Western feminists are used to talking about. I explain what is the caste system, what is Brahmins, what is Brahminical patriarchy, because it's a term that was coined by a scholar. And I explain it to a European audience. I've often had questions of, well, this sounds very degrading and dehumanizing and horrifying. And I feel very sorry for the people who are having to go through this. And I was like, well, yes, but it's great. I mean, that at least the first step is that you feel something. But pity and sorry is not what we are asking, or not what Dalit scholars are asking for. They want you to change the structural conditions in which they are being marginalized. They don't want you to feel sorry for them. In the same way, the Global South is not interested in garnering pity from Europeans. The sort of two main frames of reference of Europeans to look at the Global South are either pity or disgust. Kind of, how can this happen in and how are they okay with this? Because they must be animals to be okay with living like this. So because you have to understand, there's not enough exposure for migrants to come to Europe from different parts of the world is more common than for Europeans to truly engage with the migrant context in it, outside of tourism, outside of business, outside of going there for a few months, you know, to truly engage, to truly care about how lives function in those parts of the world. There's very little of that. And I definitely would be remiss to not mention that there are extremely empathetic Europeans who come and adopt these ways of life. But this is very limited. It's not in the same way as migrants who come from the global south are expected to quote unquote assimilate in a sense, right? That assimilation expectation is not ever put on Europeans in their whole lives. So they don't understand what it means to learn another language, learn another culture,
to really become
constantly forgive people for transgressions on your personal space. They don't understand what that means. So, yeah.
Yeah. Why did you choose Switzerland?
I don't think I chose Switzerland as much as probably Switzerland chose me. I was kind of looking for a place to apply for a scholarship. And there are to people living in India who are of a certain class and caste, there are only about 2 or 3 scholarships that are really well known. There's the British Academy, there is the Swiss federal government scholarship. There's the Marie Curie, but that's only for postdoc fellows. And there's Fulbright to go to the US. So I applied for the Swiss government excellence scholarship. I had missed the deadline on the other 2, Fulbright and British Academy. And this is the one that I applied to, and I got it. And that's how I arrived in the IZFG. And I'm very happy to have kind of joined at the IZFG. It's a space of real conversation and kind of an open space, a critical space. And I've learned a lot here than I would have expected from, because as I began to explore more and more Swiss academia, I kind of realized not every space is like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. So now you make a difference, or you're not the only one with that, but you precisely talk about decolonialism and rather than postcolonialism. Can you tell us a little bit the difference, or why do you rather work with decolonial studies?
Yes, I think that this switch happened at the end of my dissertation. During the writing of my dissertation, I was fairly engaged with post-colonial scholars, with Gayatri Spivak. I still am. I still use their work. Leela Gandhi, for example. But I kind of eventually had the feeling that there is ultimately the sort of epistemic base or the sort of theoretical framework off of which post-colonial scholars work relies heavily on the work of, for example, Michel Foucault, whom again I really use still in my work. It relies heavily on the work of Jacques Derrida, of a lot of white men, white European men. And I kind of felt like maybe for me, in the longer run, I'm more interested in exploring knowledge that comes from global South perspectives and does not speak to or feel the need to speak to or rely on white academia. And while I still feel like, for example, Michel Foucault's work is something, or Judith Butler's work is something that I will always speak to and rely on, those are also the exceptions within white academia. They are also they're both queer, they're both scholars who have had experienced marginalities of certain sorts, and they're both, like many other queer scholars, for example, like Halberstam, they're all scholars who really write passionately on exclusion and marginalization of some form. And yeah, and I think that this was one of the reasons that decoloniality for me started becoming more and more of an option. And I started speaking and spending more time with decolonial scholars, for example, with Rita Segato specifically, who writes about feminicide in South America, but also Fregoso. I realized that they have a strong community of people who have spent decades working
Mm-hmm.
on sort of contextual issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same as Dalit scholars in India. They have a
Mm-hmm.
strong community. They have spent centuries working. They have so much knowledge that an upper caste mind cannot comprehend. The
Mm-hmm.
amount of theorization and the amount of
Mm.
struggle that they've had, and also the amount that they have come up with to deal with the caste order, the caste patriarchal order. Um, and I feel like we owe it to them to explore those knowledges and to not let them be sidelined
Mm-hmm.
in our academia.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for that reason, I decided to move more and more towards anti-caste or Dalit knowledges or towards decolonial knowledges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting.
Mhm.
Now, you talked a little bit about protests, about the protest culture, protest movement in India that you grew up with, or that
Mhm.
you experienced, or that you were part of, you
Mhm.
organized. Now, can you compare that a little bit to the protest movements in Switzerland?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting to me. The first protest that I went to was the Jinjian Azadi when the Iran revolution, not the revolution, sorry, the Iran protests broke out a
Mm-hmm.
couple of years ago. Um, and I think it was called the Masa Amini protests
Mm-hmm.
because she was the kind of um, the Kurdish working class woman who was targeted by
Mm-hmm.
the police in Iran. And I remember that there was hardly any discussion of why this protest is happening. It in I liked the solidarity culture of the protest, that there were queer people, there were feminists, there were people from all walks of life, really from all classes, social classes in Switzerland. Even though it was a short protest and with very few number of people, I found it valuable that this space has been created.
Mm-hmm.
But I also found it a little absurd, to be honest, because for me, coming from a protest culture where, women wrestlers, for example, when they were sexually harassed in India, they sat for 3 months outside the parliament and
Mm-hmm.
protested, and they were beaten and dragged by the police, and they refused to get up from their place. There are videos of this online. So for when we had an allegation of sexual harassment against our Supreme Court Chief Justice, it was such a huge allegation. There were protests all across the country, and women activists were jailed. And even in my own city, people were taken from the protest where I was and jailed.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, I escaped. But from that, coming to this very kind of muted and kind
Mm-hmm.
of quiet and barely noticeable culture of protest where, it's these people really wanting to, because protest is a form of political communication and they really want to communicate, but there is no one to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Because unless they do a nationwide campaign and get a referenda, in any kind of referendum in place for anything, whether it's for queer issues or feminist issues or climate change, and for organizing a referendum, you need money. This is
Mm-hmm.
something I realized much later.
Mm-hmm.
Why are these protests small? Because they cannot get enough traction, because for that level of publicity for a protest or for that level of kind of awareness raising, you need a public campaign to
Mm-hmm.
make it a national issue. And for that, you need money.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to have a workforce, like
Mm-hmm.
labor power, to spread your message.
And that's not the
Um,
idea we have about Switzerland. The idea is everybody can make a referendum, everybody can go to the
but
streets.
that's not the case, is it? Because even Swiss researchers, there's a paper by Crisey and his co-author where they write about how protests are impossible to bring about change in a direct democracy because they are very organized. You have to take permission. There's only a small avenue that's given
Mm-hmm.
to you, that walk here and nowhere else,
Mm-hmm.
arrive here and don't go anywhere else. So they're fairly controlled and tame. And they're fairly, that misses the point of the kind of radical nature of a protest, which is to make demands and have those demands heard as immediately as possible, to not have to wait for 10 years of everyday protesting on the street before there's finally enough awareness that you can actually even hope to get enough votes in a referendum, right? Forget about organizing, because organizing a referendum already requires, there's a certain myth in Switzerland that it's easy to organize a referendum. You can only have it when you have enough signatures. And when will you have those signatures? When it becomes enough of a national issue that people care about it. So the kinds of referendums that I have seen during my time here were about mass migration, to stop migrants from coming in. They were about stopping the third gender from becoming official on a form. They were about health insurance, putting an upper cap on the insurance premiums, which was rejected. And when you see the results of all of these referendums, and when you see the protests which have not been able to manage a referendum, for example, why is there no referendum still on equal pay for equal work? There was a referendum on pension money, on equalizing the pension between women and men, but the result of that was, unfortunately, that they just gave women more time to work. They didn't raise the pension money at all. So you can sense that there is a kind of a stage is set, a political stage, where agendas are really carefully controlled, and only agendas that are kind of guided by powerful people with a lot of money. These are the ones that are making it to the referendum stage, and that they are then seeing some kind of policy action on them. And that time, sometimes even that is half. For example, in the pension case, they raised the number of years women can work, but not the actual money that women get in pension. So for me, this is very strange, because in India, we had 1.5 years of farmer protests, at the end of which the government had to take back its policy. So there is a direct route through protest to reach the ears of policymakers, which makes it far more liberating and possible to do these kind of. And this, from a Swiss standpoint, would be considered disorganized. Maybe some Swiss people will say, what do they want us to do? Act like animals and yell on the streets?
It's also something they when they talk about French protests, that's something a lot of Swiss people say, right?
Exactly. And again, France is a very protesting country, and is also a country where you can change stuff through protest. So for me, it was really interesting to come here and see, I mean, to each their own. This is the way that Swiss prefer to have their direct democracy. But the sad part is that this is the way in which marginalized people suffer. And while it's true that Switzerland has a huge middle class, which, is comfortable, and even the lower middle class is comfortable to a certain extent, there are poor people here as well. There are queer people here as well. There are trans people here as well. And it's just sad that because they cannot get enough signatures, they can't have their voices be heard. So that part really limits the nature of protest, and it limits the citizens' imagination in where can I reach? Where will I go with this protest? What can I do with it? Yeah.
Well, this podcast is about racism. We talked a lot about racism. We talked a lot about the structures of racism. Also, when we talk about decoloniality and postcolonialism. Do you think there's an academic discussion about racism happening here in Switzerland?
It started in the last few years, I would say, but it's also still very, very limited and restricted to only certain spaces. Also, I feel like there's a lot more disciplinary talk in Switzerland than one would expect. For example, if you bring up the issue of race at a historians' conference, the standard responses you would get are from a historian's perspective, not from a race perspective, not from the perspective of, okay, yes, I have read critical race theory and this is what I think about it. That's not the response you expect. You expect, well, but maybe some Partha Chatterjee or some upper caste South Asian male historian, Ramachandra Guha, he has said blah, blah, blah about this.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to realize this man is also a very privileged man, and is an upper caste man. And disciplinarily putting someone in their position is kind of a really common academic move to shut down discussions on a specific position. For example, if I bring up the issue of sexism or sexual harassment at a meeting or at a workshop that is about I don't know, migration, right? One way is to say, well, it's laterally related to our conference topic, but not really. So let's move on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's one way.
Yes.
The other way that I have faced is to say, well, because we are here all as geography scholars, or we are all here as XYZ discipline, it could be anything, as sociologists or something. Let's focus on the issue at hand and on sociology and not on. But the thing is that race belongs everywhere in every discussion. So it's not a question of whichever discipline you're taking up. As long as unless they manage to kill all people of color, then of course it can be all white people and they can talk about their issues. Just a little dark humor from my side. But otherwise, race is part of everything. And you cannot neglect it and you cannot ignore it. And this is the tendency a little bit in Swiss academia to hide behind disciplinary knowledge, or to hide behind context, or to just somehow avoid talking about race from a very radical perspective, but to sanitize it in a way, to use language of culture, to use language of migration, or some such labels to code race in a way that's made palatable to the European mind,
But not really
but
name
not
it.
directly confronted. So that is something that is rare. However, it has started happening little by little in small panels. Maybe at a huge conference, there'll be 2 panels where there'll be a lot of people of color, and they there will be talking about these issues. Which is also refreshing, because when in the absence of anything, you at least find these little spaces where you can come together.
Yeah.
But in terms of consolidated effort, there isn't much that I've ever come across. For example, there is no national association for critical race scholars or for anti-racism organization.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So we are at the IZFG. We have a lot of critical thinking that is going on here. There is a lot of feminist movements. Do you feel a difference between the feminist movements in the Swiss academia in general compared to the experience you made in India or maybe also Paris, or how do you see that?
Well, feminist movements tend to have the same issue in terms of ignoring race and ignoring structural factors. I feel like it's not just about race, it's also this kind of not inability, but kind of almost self-produced echo chamber where issues of ability or race or class are sort of brushed under the carpet a little bit. More specifically of race, class is still probably discussed. Ability and race is, again, extremely rare in feminist circles, even to have a very open and a sort of conversation where you walk away from the conversation feeling like, I'm really happy that I learned something, and I hope that I was able to offer something to my listener as well, or to the person I was dialoguing with. So there's very little space for interrogation of structural racism. There are discussions of racism in terms of that, yes, it exists, and yes, we're very sorry for it. And yes, we can offer you help in the form of listening to you. But there are no spaces of being like, well, have you written to this about the Equal Opportunities Office? If you want to write, I'm here for you. You can put me in CC. You can if you want a character witness, I'm there for you. There's very little concrete help that's offered. And that can often give the impression to the person who's suffering racism that no one cares. Because if all people are offering is to listen to you, then you also feel at some point that you exhaust your resources of talking about it. You don't wanna, you actually want some kind of material help in terms of, I mean, no one's asking for money, but material help can come in various forms. It can come with someone vouching for you that I know this person and they're not making it up. If they say they have experienced racism, they have. So, I mean, one example is that I had was recently of a Pilates studio where I went, where I was told, you have a weird smell coming from you. Can you please take a shower in our studio before you attend our class? And for me, this was extremely kind of, it was racist. I mean, there's no way around it. And I wrote an email and I demanded a confrontation and I demanded a mediation, actually. And I was assigned to this agency, GGGFON, to do a mediation. And to me, it was again this whole muted thing where the first thing that she said was, oh, once you mentioned the R word, I mean, she didn't even say racism.
Really?
Not the mediator, but the person who is the owner of this Pilates studio. She said, the moment you mention the R word, then I have to be very careful because now I'm walking on eggshells. Anything can happen to me. And I was like, anything can happen to you. Stuff has already happened to me. I have not been able to sleep for quite some time. And I'm always wondering if I smell bad. Anyone who's sitting in front of me, I'm asking my friends, am I smelling bad right now? Like, do you understand what that does to the psyche of a person? And here you are making yourself a victim about this. So there's often when I get into conversations about race within feminist academia, for example, this pattern repeats itself where I end up finding that I'm now doing the emotional labor of pacifying those people who are on that panel or in that workshop. Oh, no, I'm not calling you racist. I'm saying it's a structural problem because there is an immediate reaction in their bodies and on their faces to say, I'm not racist. What are you talking about? And so I end up being the person who's now doing the emotional labor of pacifying you. And my point is totally lost because you didn't want to listen to my point anyway. You were immediately more interested in how it's making you feel.
Yes.
Right? So that's one limitation in Swiss feminist academia that I find, that even though it's critical on many aspects, people are doing great work and there is so much solidarity. Like, I've never received this level of solidarity before from a community of academics. It's been great.
That's great.
But until I mention race, I mean, once you mention race, things are different. As long as you're talking about caste, they see it as, oh, this is their country's issue.
Something far away.
It's far away. This is their problem. It's not my problem that caste exists. But the moment you talk about race, then it's really about managing egos and managing affect. And then the burden of managing that affect falls on the person of color who is mentioning race, which I think is so taxing that at some point you just start keeping yourself out of white spaces.
Yes.
You just start saying no to workshops because you feel like, I can't do this. I can't be in a room full of 50 feminists where I have to explain why coloniality and race are being missed in this discussion.
Yeah, so if you think about the Swiss higher education, you said it a little bit, but what is the missing chapter?
I suppose I would say the biggest missing chapter is lack of recognition of structural issues and lack of accepting critique. So these for me are two. I think criticism always makes us better as people. Anyone who has gone to even one session of therapy would know that as an individual, as well as a society, criticism is the backbone of being able to evaluate yourself. And no one has to take criticism completely. You don't have to listen to everything. You take with you what you think applies to you. Don't make the black or brown person explain, hey, all of this doesn't apply to you. Only some of it does. Like, don't make them do that emotional labor of doing that. So one is the criticism. It's very hard to critique here, and it becomes an exhausting exercise. It falls completely now on the person who has given the criticism to not only manage ego, but also to offer solutions and do everything. And it's a lot. So one is to be able to take critique gracefully and to understand that critique is part of democracy and that protests are also a form of critique. So that kind of ties back to our earlier discussion a little bit as well. And the other is the lack of being able to see structure, which is that when I'm talking to someone about there is racism in this country, this is not about telling them that you are a racist. Yes. This is about the larger structure. This is about saying things are assumed to be a certain way when it's a person of color. And that the assumptions that you make hurt me because they stop me from functioning in a normal everyday existence comfortably. They make things extremely violent and uncomfortable for me. All your assumptions about where I'm from, how I live, what I eat, what I do, whom I meet, what I think, what are my aspirations. If you start putting your lens on my life, of course it's gonna hurt me because you don't know anything about me. So I think that inability to see that this is a structurally produced phenomenon, a single individual is not doing it. It's just the way it has been so hardwired into the fabric of society to think that people of color are in some sense inferior and to look for signs of that inferiority when you have an interaction with them. And that, I think, it's so important to change that way of thinking. And that labor has to fall on people, on white people, not on people of color.
Thank you very much. Now, there are very good books, very good chapters that have been written, but that are a lot of times unheard or unread. Did you bring us one?
Yes, actually, I got you two. I don't know if I can share two.
That's fine.
So one is A Critique of Coloniality, 8 Essays by Rita Segato. This was written in Spanish originally and was recently translated, I think in 2023. This is a kind of Bible of decoloniality, if you want to call it that, for me, not for everyone else. But I learned a lot from this book. The other is a book by an anti-caste scholar. It's called Karuku, and it's by Bama. She's a Dalit feminist. She writes about her life in a little Indian village and how the caste system works. And I feel like a lot of Europeans can find parallels to how inequality functions in society. So I think that's a very interesting one to read too. It's a more autobiographic account. So for people who like a little bit more fiction and not serious reading.
Okay, very nice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here, for sharing with us. It's really, really nice to have these conversations, the real conversations behind the work we do here every day. And yeah, I hope to hear and read from you more.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. And it was wonderful to have this conversation and to let some of these thoughts out. Right? Yeah.
That's great. Very good. Well, and thank you, dear listeners, for being here, or people who watch this podcast. If you like the episode, please send it to your friends, to the people who have to listen to it as well. Give us 5 stars or comment on the show, and then come back for the next episode. And I wish you a very nice evening.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. This was an episode of Missing Chapters produced by yourcast.ch. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it, listen to the other episodes, and leave us a 5-star rating. This podcast is part of the project Transforming Educational Spaces, Addressing Racism, and Embedding Intersectionality, supported by Swiss universities.
Missing Chapters is a project of the Interdisciplinary Center of Gender Studies at the University of Bern IZFG and the Gender Campus. In cooperation with the University of Applied Science and Arts Northwestern Switzerland FINW, the Bern University of Applied Science BFH, the University of Lucerne and the University of Applied Science and Arts Western Switzerland HUSSO. Editorial team in the organization: Anja Nunila Glover, Anina Mativanan, Damia Michelet, Patricia Purchett and Naomi Valdivia Rojas.